Greetings. My name is Maurice Imhoff with the Jackson County, Michigan Historical Society. Today we're doing something a little different for another From the Collection video. We are in our state archives in Lansing, Michigan, but showcasing the Jackson story with some Jackson artifacts that are in the state archives. And today I'm joined by Mr. Matt VanAcker, who is the Director of Tour and Information Services at the State Capitol. A very good friend of mine. Thank you for having us.
My friend.
Of course.
Yeah, well, thanks for allowing me this opportunity to showcase our really incredible collection of 240 battle flags carried by Michigan soldiers in the Civil War, in the Spanish-American War, and World War I. And I know our focus for this piece will be on regiments that formed and trained in Jackson, and we have a number of them, and we have the battle flags that they fought and in some cases sadly died beneath on the battlefields of the war. Save the Flags was started in 1990 as a part of the restoration of the state capitol. The original battle flags had been housed in the rotunda there, and we realized we had to do something, and something fairly soon, to preserve them and make sure they weren't going to deteriorate any more than they already had. It was a task force of volunteers that came together to make the decisions on how to care for this incredible collection.
Very delicate, too.
Very delicate, very delicate. So we partnered with our friends here at the State Museum. They provided a wonderful archival storage space where we can control humidity and temperature and light and gravity, the weight of the flags hanging from the case. Their staffs in the cases at the rotunda were literally contributing to their own destruction. So we've arrested their deterioration. Some of the flags are in need of immediate care, and those flags we either send out for conservation out to West Virginia, to the nation's leading textile conservator, battle flag conservator, and then just recently, about 2 years ago, we've been able to start conducting our own conservation at our Heritage Hall Welcome Center
in the Capitol. So now the flag is going back into the Capitol and getting worked on, right? Yeah, and then
brought back here to the storage space. Two of my colleagues, Cambray Sampson and May Euler, have undergone conservation training with our company out in West Virginia, and have brought that knowledge back here to Lansing, and it's super exciting. It's been a 30-year goal of our project to be able to conduct on-site conservation.
Preserving history in Michigan, and you kind of talked a little bit about the flags being on the staffs, and to kind of give examples. So these are replicas behind us, right?
Yeah, I want to make sure that's pointed out right away. We wouldn't treat our original battle flags like this, but these replicas were actually carried by many of Michigan's reenactment groups, many of which participate at the Jackson Muster.
So some of these are probably at Cascade.
Some of them have been there. Some of them have been on the actual battlefields where the original flags were carried by these reenactment groups for large reenactments. Some of them have been in films.
Very cool.
We have a few flags that were in the movie Gods and Generals that have been donated to our collection. What's nice about these replicas is when I bring people in and they want to get an idea of what it was like to heft a 6 by 6.5 foot infantry flag on a 10-foot staff, I can pull these out and they can actually carry it.
Get a feel for it.
They really can. And I can take these replica flags out in the field with me. When I go to Jackson to the muster, I take a number of reproductions, again, so visitors can see what the originals look like.
Well, very neat. Well, let's hop into the originals. I think you said you over 240 battle flags here.
240. So a little background into the Civil War. Michigan sent over 90,000 soldiers to fight in the war. That constituted, we believe, well over half of our eligible male population, and on per capita basis was one of the largest contributions of any of the northern states. 30 regiments of infantry, 11 regiments of cavalry, a regiment each of engineers and mechanics, sharpshooters, 1st Michigan Colored Infantry, 14 light artillery batteries. 15,000 of those men never made it home again, giving their lives, defending the Union and ending slavery in our country. Battle flags they carried with them were literally their proudest possessions. They also served as the focal point in combat. These are Napoleonic tactics during the Civil War. Lines of armed men marching against other lines of armed men, trying to get close enough to kill each other. The way you kept your alignment on the battlefield was by being with what they affectionately referred to as the colors, by being with your regimental flags. As the flags advance, the regiment follows them. As they retreat, the regiment follows them. if the flag bearer takes his staff and plants it in the ground, every man of the regiment knew that was a signal to them to fight to the last man, if necessary, to defend that battle flag, but also to defend their regiment's position on the battlefield. Incredible acts of bravery take place around the colors, and
the heart of the regiment, really.
They really were the pride of the regiment and the soul of the regiment, and they had deep emotional attachments to their flags. And to me, that's why it's so important. The work that we do here is preserving the flags, but preserving the memory of the men who fought and died beneath them. So,
well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. We should look at some battle flags.
Absolutely, let's get into it. So we have our first flag that we're going to go ahead and take a look at today, and like I said, ties right into the Jackson story. This is the flag of the 20th Michigan Infantry that was trained right out of Jackson at Camp Jackson, which was at the corner of Lansing Avenue and Clinton Street, now to the home of many houses, but also, if you know where True Community Credit Union is, their headquarters on Clinton Street, that was all of the Jeremiah Marvin Farm, which then became home of Camp Jackson in July, I want to say July of 1862, when the 20th Michigan got their start on that training ground, and this was their flag. Matt, tell us a little bit about this flag here that we're looking at.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And a little background, the 20th formed as a result of President Lincoln's call for 300,000 more volunteers to put down the rebellion. And Michigan's quota under that call was a little under 12,000 men, so the 20th formed as a result of that. One of the companies I have an affinity for because it was composed almost entirely of state employees.
Really?
Me being a state employee, they formed in Lansing, my hometown, and then made their way to Jackson. The Lansing Republican, the forerunner of the Lansing State Journal, actually wrote a little piece about the 20th. And if you don't mind, I would just read it to you, just a little bit of it real quickly. It says, "They are the cream. No man with a heart in his breast can look upon this fine body of young men going forth to battle without having feelings well up within him. May God bless them and watch over them." I love this part. We have given of the best we have. And I think that was true, really, for all the boys from Michigan that fought in the war. We literally have given of the best we have. They had a deep connection to Jackson because they trained there. And even post-war and after the war, they continued that deep connection to Jackson and to Governor Blair and his wife. They were big friends of the regiments that formed in Jackson. And we read so many articles about how that connection was developed as they were training in Jackson, and how the soldiers that were training in Jackson were always welcome guests at the Blair home, the old brown house on the hill, I guess is how they referred to
it. Was just down the street from Camp Jackson, so in order to get from Camp Jackson to Jackson itself, you passed the governor's home. They talked about, you'd see the governor outside or Miss Blair and such, and this is something that would have marched right down Lansing Avenue in Jackson, that street that still is there today.
Mrs. Blair, in articles after the war, referred to herself as the soldier's war mother. Which I think is really cool. And they had a deep emotional attachment to the Blairs. So we should point out what you're looking at here is a national. Regiments were typically given two flags, and what they referred to as a stand of colors. So they would have the national that we're all fairly familiar with, red, white, and blue, with the stars, and then they would also have a regimental, which was a dark blue flag that looked a bit like our state flag. Would sometimes have the state coat of arms painted on it or embroidered, and sometimes the federal eagle with its outstretched wings. So this is the national part of the stand of colors. We believe this was one of the flags that was presented to the regiment shortly after they formed in the late summer of 1862. You're also seeing here what we refer to as battle honors. When a regiment fought with distinction at a particular battle, they would be given permission to have the name of that battle honor lovingly painted, professionally painted onto their flag. We can see this is a history of the early war. Fredericksburg, which would have been December.
A very intense battle there.
Of 62. Going into the campaigns in Mississippi, I should point out this is Jackson, not Jackson, Michigan,
Yeah.
but Jackson, Mississippi.
Jackson, Mississippi. So if you're
Yes,
looking at this from the
yes.
outside, this is not Jackson,
Exactly.
Michigan. Jackson, Mississippi it's talking about. Okay.
Exactly, where they
There were no battles fought in Jackson,
no
Michigan.
battles fought in Jackson, Michigan. So Jackson, Mississippi. Then the regiment was actually sent back out east and came back east and participated in General Grant's overland campaign in the spring and summer of 1864. This flag was actually a flag that was captured by the Confederates at the Battle of the Crater at Petersburg, Virginia. The Battle of the Crater, to give you some background, Petersburg was siege warfare. The General Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia encamped in the city of Petersburg. General Grant trying to slowly surround and basically smother Lee's army. They finally realized that a way that they could encroach General Lee's entrenchments would be by digging a long tunnel and then packing it full of explosives and exploding it, which they did on July 30th, 1864. Wow. The 20th was in the thick of the fight, what we call the Battle of the Crater at Petersburg. At one point charged into the crater. Most of the Union troops, it was a Union defeat, a horrible Union defeat. It was the Confederates were shooting the Union troops in the crater literally like fish in a barrel. The Union troops were given the command to retreat. 30 men of the 20th had not received the command to move back out. And
in the mix of confusion and
exactly. They were fighting along with their colors. And sadly, 10 of those men were able to escape. 20 of them were captured by the Confederates along with their beloved battle flags. They had not been given up freely. They'd only been given up under the greatest of duress. Those captured Union flags went to Richmond, to the capital of the Confederacy. And then at the end of the war, when Richmond was captured, those captured Union flags were actually sent to Washington, D.C., and it was up to the regiments to prove that their battle flags had not just been given up freely. And they would, still into the 1880s, Michigan regiments were trying to get their beloved battle flags back from the federal government. This flag came back to the state's collection eventually, along with another regimental that was captured with it at the Battle of the Crater. And so we have it here now. In our storage space. I should point out that a large number of our Civil War flags were netted in the 1960s.
And that's what we're seeing here.
We are.
The missing
we
pieces.
are. Yeah, so most of this canton, about half, well, maybe a third of it is gone. This is a void. This is a hole in the flag, but the netting is a little deceiving. What happened is in the 1960s, the state of Michigan, when we were commemorating the centennial of the Civil War, the 100th anniversary, wanted to quote-unquote do a good thing for her battle flag collection. So we sent most of them to a seamstress in New York who sewed them between dyed layers of net through her sewing machine with a zigzag pattern, literally putting, sadly, tens of thousands of holes in the battle flags in her attempt to encapsulate it. The concept is sound. She wanted to make sure bits and pieces didn't detach. The execution of it was flawed because by doing that, she broke our golden rule in conservation: do nothing to an artifact that can't be reversed someday. And by her letting her needle go up and down in that flag, it broke that golden rule. One of our issues with the netted 1960s flags is that the net is deteriorating and we need to get it off. And so our two conservators now at the Capitol and our conservator in West Virginia are charged with that task. The first flag that we conserved at our Heritage Hall lab, it was 165 hours of work, and Cambrai and May estimate they snipped 100,000 stitches, and each of those were carefully removed.
I mean, we talked about a little earlier the delicacy that goes behind these flags. So you can't just take scissors and just rip it apart. It's literally each individual
They'll literally work a day and maybe, snip stitches in a space about yay big.
Wow.
So it's very painstaking and time-consuming work. It's expensive. It's part of why I'm so excited about being able to conduct some in-house conservation. Our conservator in West Virginia charges a base rate of $100 an hour. The last flag I delivered to her, she estimates, is about 600 hours of work.
Wow.
So
That's
it's
consuming,
a substantial investment in getting these flags cared for.
But an important one.
And we do raise money.
Yeah.
We take donations, so I need to mention that. So if any of you are interested in supporting the project, this is not the advertisement, although it looks like it, but reach out to me. I also, if I can point out, anyone that wants to see this collection, please notify me. Contact me through our website. You literally Google Michigan battle flags and my name will pop up there somewhere, and I'd love nothing more than to show you this incredible
I think we've talked a lot about this collection does not belong to the state of Michigan. It belongs to the people of Michigan, Michigan's battle flags for the people that went to war for the people of the state of Michigan.
This is a prized possession of the state, but they belong to each and every one of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump into another one, shall we? All right, so now we're with another flag. This one is a regimental flag, but it's for a different regiment. This is the 26th Michigan Infantry, which also was out of Jackson. This regiment also trained at Camp Jackson on the corner of Lansing Avenue and Clinton Street. They were in the later part of 1862, but they left Jackson in December of 1862, the same time that the 20th Michigan that we were just talking about was leaving the Battle of Fredericksburg. So while you have one group of Jackson men that was just on the front, you have another group that's just leaving home, and now we're going to talk about them with a couple flags, but we'll first start with this regimental. We talked about them having two different flags, Matt, a national and a regimental. This is the regimental.
This is the regimental. So again, I think I mentioned earlier, sometimes the regimentals more commonly would have the federal eagle with its outstretched wings, and then sometimes the state coat of arms, sometimes both, the federal eagle on one side, and then the state coat of arms on the other. If they would do that, though, it would have to be two pieces of silk because the paint had a tendency of bleeding through the silk.
And you say paint, these are hand-painted
by artists. We have a number of flags in our collection that were painted, including the 1st Michigan Colored Infantry Regiment, painted by Robert Hopkins, a well-known Detroit artist. So these were very professionally procured. We have the feeling that this was probably what we refer to as a depot flag. There were several sources of flags during the war, handmade flags, literally sewn by the ladies of the communities and presented to the men. We have flags that were procured through companies. Tiffany was a company that contracted and produced battle flags, and then we have depot flags that could be literally requisitioned through federal channels, much like you would requisition shoes or uniforms.
Piece of military equipment that was required, really, right?
Exactly, they really were, by regulation. They never personalized, if you will, this battle flag. Normally the regimental designation would have been painted on the red banner on the bottom. This is the 34-star flag, if you were to take the time to count those as we have, which would indicate that it was an early war flag before West Virginia joined the Union in July of 1863.
And then they started doing 35 stars.
They did, and that's a way we can very easily date flags, if you will, as far as to when they were commissioned and when they were presented to the regiment. It's a beautiful flag. These flags really are pieces of art, incredible.
I mean, the striking detail on this one, to me, you can see the tongue on the eagle, the chain going there, the claws for the feet, just very, very detailed here.
Each arrow is distinguishable. You mentioned them forming in December of '62, and I ran across a really neat article that, to me, personalized the men. It was an article, it was written in the memoirs of Newton Kirk, who was a member of the 26th and was there at Jackson when they formed. and he talked about a snowball fight that the boys
Really?
had at Camp Jackson.
Yeah.
This was in early December, and he said the companies turned out and fought against each other with snowballs, and they captured officers and imprisoned them in the tent.
Wow.
You know, and they said people at Jackson came out to watch it, and he said it was like a 2-hour snowball fight.
Wow.
You know, which to me, and these were people. They
Young
were
boys, yeah.
They were boys, and even the officers that were leading them. And granted, it may have been a good way of training them for combat, but with snowballs and not musket balls.
Right.
So.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if you could convince me to go have a Avengers reenacting snowball fight. And then Camp Jackson was made up of tents. There were no buildings to go heat up in. You were going back into tents to try to get warm. So that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
But no, I think it also talks about the camaraderie that these boys had for each other, and then to go into the battle, the heat of battle, with the flags that are from the communities. You know, the heart, the pride we talked about. This reminds them of home. This reminds them of the snowball fights with mom and pop watching at home and such like that.
These flags were a daily reminder of from whom they had come and for whom they were fighting and dying.
Yeah.
And the flags were a direct link to the communities.
Wow. Well, let's hop into another flag out of the very many. Whoops. Start over. I was doing great all day. So now we're here with another flag of the 26th Michigan. This is one of their national flags that they had, and a very beautiful one. We can see all of the different battle honors that we talked about, a variety of different battles that they were in, and some of them were actually spelled wrong, I noticed, too, in some cases.
That's
interesting.
Yeah. So these were almost all battle honors for the Overland Campaign, General Grant's attempt basically to defeat the Army of Northern Virginia under General Lee, and to how do I describe this? So before General Grant took command, a lot of times the Union Army would engage with General Lee, and then more often than not would be defeated, and then would pull back to lick their wounds, if you will.
Recover.
And when General Grant took command of the Army of the Potomac, or the command of the overall armies, his technique was to keep hitting General Lee
over and over.
And I've read recollections of the Union troops after battle thinking they were going to pull back, and they were excited when they realized they weren't going to pull back. They were going to keep engaging General Lee's army. I think General Grant recognized that the way to end the war was to defeat the Army of Northern Virginia. And so all of these battles are Grant's attempt to do just that. I mean, Spotsylvania in May of '64, and all of these battles are taking place in the Overland Campaign,
the Wilderness,
Tolopotomy, Strawberry Plains, and the engagements around the besieged city of Petersburg. And you'll finally see also Appomattox Courthouse. It was actually through the 26 lines that the terms of surrender were made at Appomattox. They were there at Appomattox.
So men from Jackson at the end of the war, the conclusion with General Lee, right there on the front lines. Very interesting.
We talk about some of the misspelling. The bottom battle honor, you'll see, says Coal Harbor, and that's actually the Battle of Cold Harbor, C-O-L-D, and not Coal Harbor. This is a beautiful flag that was fully conserved a number of years ago, stabilized, sewn very delicately between layers of acid-free netting. And we're not in danger of losing any of the bits and pieces of the fly end. You can see we have more damage on the fly end than on the hoist, basically because that was the part that would have flapped.
It's very intact over on this side, almost perfect. On this side we can see some spots. I think another thing too, talked about the battle honors, the different names. At the Jackson Civil War muster just recently, 2024, we talked about the Battle of Deep Bottom and such, and here we see Strawberry Plains, a different name for the battle there and such.
And here also, I think, a deep
bottom. So I think when I was doing research too, they had the first Battle of Deep Bottom and the second Battle of Deep Bottom. I believe they were at both, which may be why the names are like that. But either or, they put both names. Both the names on there. But still very unique to see. I mean, stuff very intense, leading all the way really to the end of the war at Appomattox Courthouse there. So. Well, very cool. Well, let's tie into something a little different here for another flag. So now we just went from very large flags, big 6 by 6.5 foot flags, to a piece here that's not even the size of a paper here. We kind of a big difference, but it still has a Jackson connection. The Jackson men were around this flag. It's something that ties into the Jackson County story. Can you tell us a little bit, what is this small piece here?
Yeah, very much so. So this is a piece of a national carried by the 26th Michigan, possibly a presentation flag that may have been at Jackson when the boys formed. We can't say for certain.
Sure.
This came into our collection in 2006, and we actually acquired it. We purchased it. Money that we raise does not go towards acquisition. It goes towards preservation and conservation. But this came up for a public auction at an auction house in Ohio in 2006, and we raised funds separately to have a go, if you will, at acquiring this piece, and we were able to purchase it. The starting bid on this was $250. We got it, hold your hat, $1,837.
For this piece of flag.
For this little bit of flag.
For that much. But I think that kind of ties into the importance of it.
It does.
Yeah. And how do we know that it was a Michigan flag?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So there's a label that was written on it. It says, "Piece of the regimental flag, 26th Michigan Infantry, War 61 to 65." This was part of a collection. Benjamin Franklin Batchelor was a soldier who fought with the 26th Michigan, well-documented, a member of that regiment. This was sold along with a whole collection, including 250 letters from Batchelor, his officer's uniform, personal accoutrements, candlesticks, leather cartridge box from his uniform.
So he saved a lot of his items.
And his full uniform. And the family had consigned this auction house in Ohio to sell the items off for them. And so very well documented. Its provenance is undisputed. It has a history, which is what archivists and historians look for, is the bit of history that connects it.
Verify it.
Verified, turns out Benjamin Franklin Batchelor was not only a member of the regiment, he was a flag bearer for the regiment. One of the letters he wrote after the Battle of Spotsylvania, he writes that I was there at the battle carrying our colors and was within rods of the Confederate breastworks before I was wounded carrying the flag. I'm fairly certain that this is the flag, a piece of the flag that Batchelor carried at Spotsylvania. Spotsylvania, according to Bruce Catton, a very well-known Michigan Civil War author and historian, in his estimation was the worst fighting of the entire war. And a lot of that horrific fighting took place at the Muleshoe, a bend in the Confederate line. The Union troops considered it a soft spot and put regiment after regiment, brigade after brigade up against the Muleshoe. Part of the Muleshoe was the Bloody Angle, and that's where the 26th was engaged.
The thick of it,
the thick of the fighting. It rained during the battle. Men weren't even bothering to load their weapons. They were using them as clubs to kill each other. One of the recollections was that the Union troops were reaching over the Confederate breastworks and grabbing them by the hair to pull them over to the other side so they could bludgeon them to death. The end of the battle, Union troops buried 3 and 4 deep in front of the breastworks, and Batchelor was there within rods of that fighting when he was wounded. He survives his wounds and writes the officer's test while he's in the hospital and gets a commission as an officer in a colored regiment. And then kept this collection together all these years, and then we were able to acquire this piece. I should mention 1837 is a significant date in Michigan. It's our statehood date. So for us to get a piece of the 26th Michigan's battle flag for 1837, and we were the 26th state and became the 26th state on January 26, 1837. The whole thing is kind of spooky.
Wraps around.
I would have rather gotten this for the starting bid of $250, but this is important for us to have. We saw the other national of the 26th. That part of that flag is intact. So
Okay.
we do
This is
not
a different
own
flag
the flag
then. Yeah.
that this piece came from. It is
Wow.
not in our collection.
Wow.
So for this may be the only piece of that flag
Still
that
in
exists.
existence,
I'm
yeah.
hoping that other pieces are floating out there somewhere, and we may find out about them and maybe even acquire them at some
Sure.
point. But at this point,
Maybe a
this
viewer
is
at home
the only
watching
piece.
might have it in
Yeah,
their trunk.
hopefully. Maybe it's in your basement or in an attic or in a barn or in a chest or something. It's neat about this too is Batchelor thought enough about this little piece of flag to write this label 30 years after the end of the war. He wrote it on the back of an old letter. It says, "Father and Mother request me to extend for them an invitation to Ed and Justin for Thanksgiving, 1893.
So this was a letter that he had just
Letter
on
that
the
he had.
table.
He was
and-
from Howell, Michigan. I
Yeah.
picture Benjamin in his study in his home in Howell, Michigan, thinking about this 30 years after he possibly carried the flag
Yeah.
that this came from into combat, and thinking, I ought to write a label on that little bit of nothing.
Yeah.
So someday my children or my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren or some historian at the state capitol knows how important this piece of flag was
Right.
to
And
me.
just grabbed a piece of scrap paper
Yeah,
and
and he wrote it on an old letter,
And
which
that's
this adds to
paved
the
the way
story
today, yeah.
I think. Yeah.
wow, that's a great place I think to end and
Yeah.
really wrap around all the unique pieces that we saw today here at the Michigan State Archives, or Archives of Michigan, I should say. That we have artifacts from the Michigan State Capitol here that are our Jackson base, have the
Yes.
Jackson story, and our Michigan's flags that people can come and visit. So thank you, Matt, very,
Thank you,
very much
Maurice.
for
It's
having
been my
us. and
pleasure.
Thank you to JTV for being able to put this production together, and the Jackson Community Foundation for their support of this project that we're doing. So thank you all
Thank you.
again, and we hope to see you in another video.